One of the things that I really love about playing percussion is there are many ways to play, and each different approach or technique, method, etc. has different affordances and constraints. So some techniques or approaches allow you to do some things better than others, and it simultaneously prevents you from being able to do things that other techniques allow you to do. Whether it's like mallets, like Burton is much better for some things than Stevens. And same thing for like traditional versus match grip versus like, are you going to play with French, American, or German technique? Like there's many different approaches to this. You can use finger, you can use wrist, or you can use a little bit of molar, etc. So rather than thinking about what is right or wrong, think about what the affordance and constraint is for different kinds of techniques that you might see other people using, and ask them, why are you using that approach as opposed to another approach? So with traditional grip, thumb in alignment with the forearm, stick resting inside of here. It rests on the point where the nail meets the finger. You are going to bleed, you're going to develop calluses, and it's going to hurt. So FYI, that is normal. So you pull the index finger over on top, and you rest your thumb on top to make a lowercase t. You don't want to have a capital T with your thumb and your index finger. And then the middle finger, you want to have relaxed. If it comes off the stick a little bit every now and then, like if you're doing diddles, that's fine, as long as you're not pointing it, because then you're going to be flipping off all of your fans and your judges, and they're going to be upset, and it's going to be a controversy, and people are going to cancel you, etc. Just kidding, that's called a joke. So you want to have this like relaxed, just kind of hanging out over here. But if it comes off a little bit, that's fine, as long as it's not creating tension. The pinky is going to hug inside right here. You don't want this coming off of here because it's going to create tension. Everything is going to be nice and compact, but not tight. Do it! Yes, you can! I always run completely out of breath after about 15 minutes of my band set. Any advice? One thing that you can focus on is actually your cardio. So specifically just like working on just like long-term endurance cardio, or even doing sprints, etc., to be able to make it so that when you got on the drum kit, things were a little bit easier. I know this sounds weird, but I have a treadmill that I use that has some arms on it. I took a tenor pad, like one of these things, and I laid it across it, so that way I can actually basically march while I drum on this, and I will do it at an incline, and that makes it so that I can work on cardio while I am drumming. So that's an option. Just be careful when you're doing that. You don't want to like fall or anything, so make sure there's nothing behind you or around you. Point of this is to make it so that you can speed up your paradiddles. So it does the last three notes of the paradiddles, or another way of saying that is it gets rid of the second note on here. So you have da 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 da, and then you play the paradiddle. Then you do it off the left, same thing. And then it plays the first three notes of the paradiddles. What I recommend doing is starting off slow. This can go as slow as 20 beats a minute, and then slowly working your way up. It can go all the way as fast as 160. During my recital, during my undergrad, I did this multi-percussion piece, constantly changing the meter. The first like whole page, like every other measure is like a completely different meter. And it had a track that you played along to with the speakers. And the person who was running the stage had press the pause button rather than the stop button. So it started like 15 seconds into where we left off on the sound check. I'm like trying to improvise. Like I have no idea what the meter is because like I don't know where it's at in the music. I forgot where I had stopped when we were doing the sound check, etc. And then finally found like a big point after just improvising stuff like, okay, here's where we're at in the music, and was able to pick it up. So one of my professors came up to me afterwards, and he was like realized what happened like immediately because like he knew the piece very well. He's like, well, this is going to be interesting. A piece of advice that I received to focus on listening is to try and make the person on the inside of you to disappear. And if you are the center snare, then the metronome to disappear. So you want to make sure that you do not hear like a flam sound when you're practicing with any of these free play-alongs that are linked at the top of the screen. So rudimental percussion, your grace note, regardless of whatever the primary note is, it's always going to be dropped in, and it's going to be the same distance from the primary note. So it's not going to be open or closed where it's a flat flam, like that, okay? and you're not going to raise it up just because you happen to have an accent right before it. This is different from concert percussion. Concert percussion, usually speaking, you're going to have the grace note be half the height of the primary note, and the distance between the grace note and the primary note is going to change depending on the size of the drum and how low it is tuned. So if it is a larger drum head and it is tuned lower, then you're going to play it with more of a da-da, like you hear that kind of a rhythm rather than a cha sound. And again, it will be half the height of whatever your primary note is. This play along is a variation of gallop. It goes as slow as 20 beats a minute all the way up to 160 beats a minute, one click at a time. It's a great way to work on your diddles, and there's an inverted version with inverted diddles and inverted rolls, as well as thousands of hours of free play alongs at the link on the screen. When it comes to diddle interpretation, you want to have a perfect rhythmic interpretation of a diddle. However, there's a tendency for some players to play a little bit rushed or fast or a little bit slurred out or slow. In order to make it so that you can control to play with a perfect diddle every single time, there's this exercise here called 5-stroke roll timing. There's another variation called diddle timing that has you play the slurred out interpretation, the perfect interpretation, and the rushed interpretation for different variations of 5 strokes or diddles. So it moves it around the triplet. So this is an excellent exercise that you can play along to from 40 to 200 beats a minute to refine your 5-stroke timing. Two schools of thought that I heard a professor talk about one time. So they're talking about how the Western school of thought tends to focus on the technical rather than the musical first. And there is more of a European where they focus on the musicality before the technicality first. What I recommend is focusing on technical before the musical. Why? Because then you can focus on making it so that you can play intentionally musical rather than just kind of like not being able to be in control over your musicianship. Cue the Rocky theme music. If you want to find the play along that I was just using, there are several more different variations of slow paradiddle, and you can find all of that at jaredoleary.com/drum, where there's just under 1,400 hours of chop stuff, permutation stuff on drum kits, some charts, over 500 grid variations, and a hiccup, as well as a bunch of technique stuff, another hiccup, and some marching bass permutations that you can work on your splits and your runs and all that fun stuff.